Hello and welcome to Unbounded Growth, a podcast that challenges you to grow and become a better version of yourself. My name is Mark Allen, and together with my friend Adam, we share thoughts and ideas from the books that we read and how they enhance our personal growth and development. We also host other readers and leaders. We learn from their experiences through our discussions. Our episodes air every Tuesday at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you for listening in, and let's grow together. Unbounded Growth. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Unbounded Growth. This is episode 18. We are still talking about the 5 levels of leadership. It's our second to last episode of this season, and it's our last episode talking about our series on leadership, at least as far as the 5 levels of leadership are concerned. As we have mentioned before, after this, we are going to take a break. So we won't have any recording coming for the month of April. But next week, Adam reminded me that I actually talked about the 20th, having our interview with Lontage being released, but it won't be on the 20th, it will be on the 20th, which will be next Tuesday. So this will be the last week that Adam and I are recording live in person here. Next week, we have the interview that was already pre-recorded. We just wanted to finish up with this series on leadership before hearing that. And then for the month of April, we will be available on Instagram. We'll still be available with some posts on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube as well. But then we won't have any episode that we heard and not any new episode. We resume back in the month of May, and you can already tell on my left or right, whatever side of the screen it is, a few books that we have already lined up that we are so excited to dive into, talking about the mind, talking about your thoughts and what are the things that you can do consciously to change the way you think and how that affects your life. My name is Mark Allen Muteba. I'm your host, and I'm here with my co-host and friend Adam Shebindo. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you doing?
I am doing amazing. It's been a fun series. I was just telling Adam before he got started, it was both fun and challenging. We both got sick. We missed a few episodes, but then there's also a lot of lessons. I think Adam and I were just reflecting. Unbounded Growth will be a year soon, which we are pretty excited about. But then we are just reflecting on our lives and how this podcast has even changed our own lives, how is affecting us, just reviewing some of these books that we've read before, or even just going through some of those that we've talked about before, just the ways changing even the way you're thinking, reminding you of some lessons, and most importantly, just going through those books and looking at that one lesson that you missed last time, or maybe you're at a point or a stage in your life where it didn't make any sense, and all of a sudden, the one lesson is making a lot of sense to you. So it's really, really been great for us too.
Yeah, and also it raises up accountability as well. We just don't come here and talk about stuff that we don't practice or we don't live by. Mm-hmm. And the principles that we've been learning through the couple of years that we've been really learning through this have been impacting our lives directly. Mm-hmm. And just revisiting them, it's kind of bringing a certain type of nostalgia. That's how I lived through this content and how I lived through this book, and now I'm revisiting it again, and I'm having those memories, those flashbacks that are coming back to me compared to when I first read it, or even when I applied it. Then I start to see these flows and this kind of like gap in the character that could have missed while I was applying these principles, and then it's just coming back. And I believe it's on the Sunday I was discussing with some people, with a few young men that I've been just mentoring and talking to. And I was telling them about these very basic and small things of character and those flows of character that even myself, I could overlook at a certain point. But when I observe now how this podcast has impacted me, mm-hmm. and now when I take a step back and I start looking at my own leadership and my own growth, mm-hmm. then I look at even some minor things like that I've become so aware of these very, very small things mm-hmm. that happen around me or that I make happen. Mm-hmm. That I probably shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And then there's this question that just come back to my head, to my mind, that, hey, this is really not what you've been standing for or what you've been showcasing to the rest of the world, that you who you are as a person, and it doesn't value you. So then now being faithful in those very small things, they're starting to hold up like big stuff. Like there's a very small example. When I go work in a clean room, in our clean room, we have these sheets that we have to fill out. And we fill it out just out of formality that, hey, I use this machine. And just basically out of formality. And sometimes you can overlook that sheet. Sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I've been using this machine like 5 times in a day. If every time I use it, I have to go fill out, it's kind of like, yeah, it's tedious. It's a little bit annoying. Yeah, but then like when I was just about to not fill it out, then I start telling myself that, hey, this is not the type of message I want to send to anybody who works here. This is not the type of values. What if something happened and there is this gap between the last person and me? I was in there and they're now incapable of tracking or doing their job just because I had this flow of character somewhere and I didn't do it. And then I just start seeing like those small things that I seem not to care about. Now that we are revisiting all of these values and everything that's we are standing for as leaders in our community and organizations, those small things, I start now applying them to the bigger stuff. That I'm living by these principles. Now the organization that I lead, I'm also making sure that the people that I'm leading are also following up some of these basic things that hold up the big stuff. So it's been, it's directly been a huge blessing and just a way to keep myself in check and keep myself accountable for my own personal growth as I lead others.
That's very interesting, Adam, that you're talking about that. As a matter of fact, there's a story that really happens while we are recording all these the episode from this second season. It was interesting that happens. I heard it about an hospital where a patient came in and talking about filling out sheet, and while the nurse was thinking to herself, well, the patient just got here, let me finish up what I'm doing here, and then I'm going to fill up all this form and get back to him. While she was doing that, the patient fell off the bed and they had to call, like, I think a cold blow or something like that. But then when they started asking her question, running investigation, even just wondering why did this patient come in the first place, she didn't have an answer for it because she hadn't just gone through that extra step to ask them what's going on, why did they come in, and just fill out those forms. And I think it's a very valuable lesson for all of us here, even on Bonded Growth, and everybody listening, just the lessons that we learn every day and as we grow through these books. I think for me as well, just the accountability part of it, where once you read these books and you reread them and you read them again and you're sharing the lessons about them, it brought me back some memories, such as I started understanding why some of these values and some of these beliefs are held so strong in my mind. Because some of these books, I read them 5 years ago. I had them, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. And the lesson stuck with me. And at some point, even after I've forgotten the book or I've forgotten the author, the lessons were still there. The funny thing is, I was looking at my email. So I have 2 different email addresses. Adam knows the second one. It's kind of like a private email address that I use. And at the bottom of that email address, like, it's something that I don't do on all my email addresses, but I write software engineer right underneath my name. And I remember a few years ago, I was taking a class online, and this guy was saying, like, learn how to code and make $10,000 while doing it. And one of the things he talked a lot about was like confirming your identity over and over again. So your email signature, you need to write what is it that you do. So that's a reminder to yourself and a reminder to everybody else that, hey, this is what I do. And if you ever need our services, you can reach out to me. And then, a friend of mine also told me about his favorite scripture, how he always writes his favorite scripture by the end of his in his email signature. And I started doing that. So as I was sending the invite today so that we can do this recording, I looked at it and I was like, wow, I can't believe that I'm still, this just stayed here and I'm still doing it. So the lessons that we're sharing here from what we're learning from these books, I believe that if we are faithful and if we continue to try to implement them in our lives, maybe we won't get 100% the first time around, but the more you think about it, the more you do it, there will get a point where these lessons just stick in your mind. And you won't even remember, well, I read that from John Maxwell or I heard that on Unbounded Growth 5, 10 years ago, but it still have an impact in your life. All right. With that being said, we are going to dive in and we are going to start talking about the fifth level, the fifth level of leadership. And again, this is a much smaller level, and neither Adam and I have a lot of experience on this. We actually don't have any experience on this. Getting on that level actually takes some years to get there, as John Maxwell explains it. But also when we look around at the people that we respect that have gotten to that level, we know that they put in the work and they've been doing this for years. They've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and some of us here are not even that old. So I'm going to dive into it. In the introduction here, there's something that caught my attention. It said that leadership at this high level lifts the entire organization. And just a reminder, the fifth level is the pinnacle level. People follow you because of who you are and what you represent. People no longer follow you because you've done something for them. People no longer follow you because of the things that you've done for the organization. Some people are not even in your organization. They just follow you because of who you are and the respect that you bring around every time, a leader is mentioned. And we see that later, you even earn the right to be heard. As you know, John Maxwell points it out well. In America, we believe in the freedom of speech. But then everybody has the freedom of speech, but you need to earn the freedom to be heard. You need to earn the respect from people so that people can actually hear you. Everybody can say whatever they want to say. How many people listen when you're doing that? Even as I'm talking about that, I started reading this other book by John Maxwell. It's called, I've never, the title is pretty lengthy, but it says everyone communicates, but few connect. And just as I started the book today and I was reading the introduction, going about connecting with people have to hear you. And if people are going to hear you, then you have to earn that respect that when you speak, people listen. And I think John Maxwell talks about that in one out of his books. I think the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, where he says that when a leader speaks, people listen. And that's when you'll see a difference between a leader and non-leader. And when it comes to, to a level 5 leader, when leaders like that speak, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. When leaders that have earned their respect, they've led at that level, the fifth level of leadership, a pinnacle level, whenever they speak, people listen. We see people like Billy Graham. It didn't matter what you believe. When Billy Graham spoke, people listened. People paid attention to what he was saying because he had grown and earned that respect, and earned the respect to be listened, to be heard from other people. So John Maxwell here says, leadership at this level lifts the entire organization, creates an environment that benefits everyone in it, contributing to their success. Level 5 leaders often possess an influence that transcends the organization and the industry the leader works in. Again, that's what I just mentioned. When people get at that level, it transcends the organization and the leadership or whatever organization they lead in, or even, their beliefs and where they stand and what they stand for, because they've earned the respect to be heard and the respect to be listened to by other people.
Yeah, and I'm just going to backtrack just a little bit with the definition of this level that I feel like you did not cover earlier, is that a level 5 leader is a leader who create other leaders. So basically, it's not just level 4 is people development. You see a quality in someone and you feel like that person can be raised up to the challenge of becoming your peer in leadership. In level 5, you are developing level 4 leaders. So you're developing leaders who train other leaders. And that's where it becomes challenging. That's where it requires a lot of maturity. It requires a lot of experience. It requires a lot of dealing with people. So it's just, you can't be at that level just leading people for 2 years or for 3 years. You can develop people, but for you to actually be capable of leaving a legacy, leaving a name, and there are, very amazing people that have left amazing name, and one of which is being the Lord Jesus Christ. As he preached and as he talked to his disciples who were leaders, and who train other leaders. And now it's to the power N, basically, where it's unlimited. The legacy is unlimited. And as we go through this, there's a professor that I came across a couple years ago. And the reason why actually I do even what I do, a professor tried to recruit me to join his lab. And he told me something. I did not join his lab, by the way. I ended up not taking his offer.
Right.
But he was trying to recruit me. And he mentioned one thing. He was like, Adam, are you ready to do research? And I said, what do you mean? Like, I'm already doing research. I'm publishing a paper. I'm working on this and I'm feeling good about it. He was like, yeah, no, what you're doing is a project. It is not research. I was like, okay, what's the difference? Like literally, like this is valuable. Everybody wants it. It's like, no, what you're doing is with some level of training, basic level of training, anybody, you could just teach them what to do, and they maybe can Google a few things and they can figure it out. But when it comes to research, he said that because, of course, I took his class and I aced his class, was among the few people who aced the class. So he was like, among, like in the whole world, there's only about 7% of people who can do mathematics. And if you're among that 7% worldwide, you should not be wasting your talent into something small or something else. And I was like, what do you mean? Then he went on and say that people who do research, they are not the one that just work on a project because next year somebody going to come up with a better technology than what you are creating. But people who do research are the people who create something, a concept, and that concept can revolutionize the world for the next 300 years. Think of the Newtons of this world. Think of the Einsteins of this world. That is what research is called. Research and anything that you're trying to accomplish gotta leave a legacy. And that is what is rewarded by Nobel Prize. And I believe in this, in this episode, we're going to talk about Alfred Nobel, as John Maxwell mentions him there. The reason why people receive Nobel Prize is not because they were level 4 leaders. It's not because they had labs and they had people that they train in their labs, that they got PhDs, and those people went on and developed other people. Now, the reason why people do get Nobel Prize is because they do leave a living legacy that is so important that the entire world wants to keep and want to have, or it can change the world for the next 300 years. And that leads us to the first, to the upsides of the Pinnacle. And the first one he talks about here is the Pinnacle leadership creates a level 5 organization.
And that's as Adam mentioned, you getting to a point where you wanna leave a legacy, and that's the whole level of Pineapple leadership. People who really raise up a level 4 leaders. Raising up leaders alone is already not easy, and then raising up leaders that can raise other leaders, that's even more challenging, because the biggest challenge about it, I believe, is you don't have control over the leaders that you're raising, right?
Yeah,
you can raise great leaders that can do the job, but will they continue with the legacy? Are they going to raise some other leaders in the future that can actually, do a lot more than what you did, that you ever did? So the first one here, John Maxwell talks about, and as Adam mentioned, Pinnacle leadership creates level 4 organization. Level 4 organizations are those organizations that have been existing since 1908. Every single founding father of the organization no longer exists. As a matter of fact, I was reading, there's this book I'm reading here. It's probably in the back. You can't see because my chair is covering it. But this book talks about the E-Myth, the E-Myth in business. At the beginning, the statistics are kind of staggering when they say that more than 300 LLC start, and more than 300. It's not only 300. I believe the number is much bigger than that. I'm just going to bet on 300 right now. There is more than 300 LLC that start and die within a year. that tells you a lot about, how hard it is to sustain a business, how hard it is to start something that will transcend your life, will transcend your legacy, will transcend, your kids and your kids' kids, and an organization that can be there for centurion and a level of years. The reason why those organizations exist and are sustained is because either those organizations were created by level 5 leaders, or the organization at some point started being led by level 5 leaders. Simply because an organization wasn't created by a level 5 leader doesn't mean that a level 5 leader cannot take over the organization and take it beyond the limit that were ever imagined for it. The simple example is McDonald's. I don't think McDonald's was built by level 5 leaders, but when they associated and partnered with, I can't remember the name of gentleman, but when they associated and partnered with him, the guy took the whole company franchise. He franchised the whole thing, which gave them exponential growth beyond what the two McDonald brothers had ever imagined. So simply because an organization is started by level 5 leaders doesn't mean that it cannot grow. It cannot be grown by level 5 leaders. And level 5 leaders at this point here, they create level 5 organization. One thing that John Maxwell mentions here, say, many organizations seem to struggle to maintain their existence. Others work hard to inch their way toward growth or increase profitability. And I say, meanwhile, a few organizations rise above the rest and seem to function at an extraordinarily high level. What's their secret? Leadership. And that's the only thing that we separate a small organization, a medium organization, good organization from great organizations. You're talking about the Apples and the Microsoft. You're talking about, the Tesla. Maybe, we can't say that about Tesla yet. It's just been around for a few years. Maybe in 20, 30 years, we're going to talk about Tesla. You're talking about an organization like NASA. You're talking about, even just the US government. Why has it been sustained for this long? We've seen countries starting and, within a few years, becoming 4 other countries, and it's 50 states that have been together for all this long. What's the secret? Being led by level 5 leaders.
Yeah, and I gotta go up in there, but John Maxwell actually, he went on and talks a lot more, and it's probably even somewhere, even in a bunch of his books. He quotes a few times Jim Collins, and I've had a chance to study Jim Collins for a few of his business class or his business books, and one of the books that I really liked from him was Good to Great.
Right.
And actually, they are kind of piggybacking each other. So Jim Collins talks about 5-level leadership from John C. Maxwell, and Jesse Maxwell, where it goes back and kind of just, they're going back and forth with each other. I'm guessing they're friends. But Jim Collins mentioned this level 5 leadership in organizations. And in Good to Great, he's demonstrating that the leadership, the capability to train, the capability to develop leaders who train other leaders, can transform an organization from a good organization to a great organization. So he did a survey of over, more than 20 really amazing companies. And he looked at companies that failed or companies that did not reach their potential, companies that they had a leader who had to resign so that it can be taken over by another leader who can take the company to the next level. So you look at the banks, you look at a bunch of systems that he could be actually able to see into things. And there is something that John C. Maxwell here talks about when he mentioned this level of leadership. He said, whenever you reach at that level, he said, and in time, leadership becomes part of their DNA. Yeah. And even when one leader steps down or retires, there are many leaders ready and able to take their place because level 5 organization have a pipeline of leadership being produced. And that is having an abundance of leaders. I mean, of course, we talked about it earlier when people will feel threatened by that and so on. But having a pipeline of leaders and you're raising them to the level 4 in such a way that any of them, you can see that, hey, if I'm not here today, somebody else can take over and the organization is still going to be great. That's what makes powerful nations. And the second point, go ahead.
Yeah, another example I wanted to give of maybe a level 5 leader in the Congo that we've seen raising up in the recent years. Someone like what's his name? Dallot, Pastor
Roland Dallot.
Roland Dallot. I was looking for his first name. It's like, I was like, what is it? Dallot what? It's Roland Dallot. Roland Dallot is a leader of a church in Congo. Started a church, I want to say in 2008. And today, the church has grown into maybe all the 5 continents right now. I don't know if they're already in Australia, but I know that they have extensions in America, in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, more than, 30, 40, 50 extensions. And you can see how leaders in those organizations are actually separating themselves, becoming leaders in their own terms. And the man has earned more respect simply because of the person he is, not even because of anything he's building up. People just respect him for the person he is. And I think we're seeing more and more people starting to understand the leadership and starting to rise to that level of leadership, which leads me to the second point, say that Pinnacle leadership creates a legacy within an organization. One thing that John Maxwell says here, and I fight a lot with my friends, my Pan-Africanist friends, that sometimes I agree to disagree with them. John Maxwell said the final test of a leader is that he leaves behind him other men. He leaves behind him in other men the convictions that will carry on. That was said actually by Walter Lippmann. And the fact I've always had a lot with Pan-Africanism, I believe that they did a great job. They did a great job to get most African country independent. We're talking about, independent from colonialism, independence from just governance, being able to govern your own country and all that. But the drawback that I've always had with a lot of Pan-Africanism, the movement and the whole thing, and all the fathers of colonialism, of independence in Africa, the fathers of independence in Africa, is that it seems to me, and I may be completely wrong about this, but it seems to me that a lot of their legacy went with them. The kind of fight and courage that our Pan-Africanist fathers had, if that legacy had carried on for even another 30 years, let's say from the 1960s where most African countries became independent, if that the same spirit had carried on, let's say until at least the 1990 or the 2000, the early 2000, I think Africa would be far, far way more developed than it was today, than it is today. But I feel like we're still in financial colonialism. We're still living some type of colonialism in Africa, because to some extent, I believe our fathers, our independence fathers, their legacy was not as great as they were. I haven't seen another Lumumba in Congo. I'll be honest. I've seen people that have got close to it, but I haven't seen another. To me, someone like Lumumba, we should have had 50 Lumumbas. We should have 50 Kwame Nkrumah in Africa, across Africa. Of course, today, a lot of people are trying to raise up to that level, but it's still a very big challenge. My point in all this is to say that legacy is the leader's signature. And John Maxwell says that their leadership creates a legacy within the organization. So the way to know if a leader was great is to see what becomes of the organization once they are no longer there. Once they die, what happens to the organization? And that's why, we talk a lot about some of these religious leaders. We talk about the Lord Jesus. We talk about Muhammad Gandhi. We talking about, Buddha. We talking about Muhammad. These people have, as Martin Luther used to say, that the world is being led by dead people. All these people went on. Of course, if you're Christian, the belief that Jesus came back to life is a lot different. But all these other leaders, they died centuries ago. But you can still feel their influence in the world today, because they created leaders that multiply their vision or their effort or stuff like that. And that's why it's kind of hard to to stop things like terrorism, for example, or racism, for example, because those things have been created by leaders and they've created ideologies, and people do not believe in the leader anymore. They start believing in the ideology of the leader. So it doesn't matter how many you kill. There's always going to be someone who has strong beliefs in that. And the only way you change something like that, I mean, one of the ways you change stuff like that, of course, is it's much more complex than just talking about it here, is to change those ideologies. If you can get to the core of the ideology and change the way people are thinking about certain things, yes, you can change them. But again, going back, leadership, pinnacle leaders leave a legacy behind them.
Yeah, and there is this kind of feeling of doing more than just succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
There is a succeeding and going beyond succeeding. Like you mentioned one thing there, and I'm gonna pick an example, like creating an ideology or a concept, and the concept that's gonna live even after you're gone. And that's one of the biggest one actually that we've seen in our time is Facebook with social media.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of social media. As soon as he created that concept, built a level 5 organization around it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, it's something that everybody else now is coming just, to fetch from and create their own thing. And it's kind of it's what actually makes level 5 leadership. And that's why I'm still striving hard to be able to someday to achieve that level. On point 3 here, he say Pinnacle leadership provide an extended platform for leading. And he make a big point here. He say, in America, we believe everyone has the right to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But even in a free society, you have to earn the right to be heard. And of course, social media has kind of moved this stuff a little bit around. And he has kind of just played around with a lot of this stuff, because right now you actually just to earn the right to be heard, you have to be doing something that either is like very, very important or very, very stupid. And and it's kind of the world in which we are living in today. A lot of people say a lot of nonsense, but again, all of those stuff it's fed by ideology. It's fed by something that somebody else has left, which kind of like just piggyback behind the fact of leaving a legacy. And John C. Maxwell mentioned something here that I felt that was important. He say level 5 leaders understand that the highest position of leadership is not a place to be served but by others, but to serve others. It is not a place to receive, but a place to give. So there's an extension to leading, where it's kind of like it will bring a lot of confusion, because when you think about leading, you think about leadership. I can even take this thing back to like antiquity, where people were strong leaders. They were actually assumed to be like semi-god, like demigods and stuff. Because they had a way of leading, which was like, it was not just directly serving, it was just like imposing their will and doing this and so on. And a lot of them are completely dead right now. But the ones that actually went ahead and served other people or promoted the idea of service, and this stuff, the Lord Jesus Christ, you can see him at that way, where I'm actually reading a book called Lead Like Jesus. I'm almost done with the book, and it's such an amazing book. I've learned a lot on just the minor things in Jesus's way of leading, and service was his core.
His core of leading.
His core part of leadership, and it's so effective. And I think that's been adopted by the American system, basically the big corporate America, where the people in leadership, the managers, the CEOs, like I think it was Michael Bloomberg. One day I was actually reading about him, and he was telling the story basically that how all of this started. Like, I used to show up before everyone, making sure I'm serving everybody coffee, because we need that. People need to be having that coffee,
right?
So the day can actually advance. And in serving others, it should be something like legacy and service. And it's kind of like you live a legacy only if you served,
right?
And that's actually where John Maxwell, kind of the points that John Maxwell is trying to drive here.
Yeah, and I think there's been actually a shift in the American leadership society as a whole. I mean, across every organization. I was reading Chris Mullen's book on attractness to blindness or something like that. Attract to blindness. I can't remember the exact title, but it's something that has to do with blindness. He talks about equity, diversity, equity, inclusion. But in that book, he explains a lot about what the corporate American society leadership was like back in the days. It was more of a structural army type of leadership, top to bottom leadership. I am the boss, you answer to me, and I tell you this. But at some point, I think, as you say, the American society or the American corporation realized that leadership wasn't about being served, it's about serving. And leaders in these organizations are going out of their ways to actually find ways to serve. Of course, some of them, as with everything, it's you do it for the t-shirt and you do it for the media. But the organizations that actually have understood and are actually trying to implement this and apply this in their lives have actually made a very great difference. John Maxwell talks here about Einstein here, talking about Einstein's reputation went far beyond the halls of academia in the field of physics. His influence has continued long after his death, talking about the world being led by dead people still trying to figure out some of this ancient stuff that he was doing, and said that is what happens with leaders and thinkers of his caliber. That's what happens when leaders who make it to the pinnacle level. So the point John Maxwell is trying to make here in some other extent is that when you become a pinnacle, and he gives this example here with all the phases of leadership, you learn, you earn, and you return, and all the phases of life, you learn. There is a point in life where all of us learn. You're learning something, you're improving, you're becoming better. And because you've learned and you've accumulated so much in your knowledge, you begin to earn from the knowledge that you've gotten. You go to college for 4 years, you've been learning. And at some point you start earning. But now the biggest piece of this all to me is where you return, because people won't remember you for how much you learned. People will remember you for how much you earned. People will remember you for how much you return to them. What did you do in their society? What did you do in their places? I think one of the biggest challenging questions that I've read in some of the books that talk about, your life, when you talk about your future, is asking yourself the questions. Think about this for a moment. You're laying down, you're dead, and people are gathered around you. What are those people saying about you? And every time I think about those questions is, okay, what would I want people to say about me? And when you think about it, it prompts you to change the way you live. I don't know, Adam, if he talks about it in this book, I can't remember, but I read the story about Nobel, the guy after whom the Nobel Prize is actually named. That guy wasn't, I think he invented the dynamite or something like that.
Yeah.
He invented the dynamite, and one day, an article from the journal came out. They said he had died, but it wasn't him. It was someone else who had a similar name, and the person had died. So he was reading the journal, and what people were saying about him were not very kind things. Not necessarily kind, but he didn't like what people were saying about him. He didn't like the way his life was being portrayed in the journal. And that was one of the fewest people that ever have that opportunity to actually know what people say about you, the honest opinion of people that think that you are no longer there. And then he said that prompted him to change his life, to even create that Nobel Prize. He said, listen, I want people that do things that change the world, that actually benefit humanity, to actually be recognized and be given this Nobel Peace Prize that's known today. So the question is always like, what will people say about me? And does that reflect the type of life you want to live? And if you're a leader and learning and growing to that level of a level 5 leader, what are the type of legacy that you would like to leave?
Yeah, and there's one point here that he closes this upsides with, and to me, it's where I'm actually standing and where what I'm advocating for, and everyone that I'm trying to lead, or everyone who works with me have also learned that. He said, no matter where you are in your own leadership journey, I encourage you to learn all you can and keep learning. And you reach the and when you reach the earning phase, don't stop there. Don't lead others solely for your own benefits. Start giving to others and teaching them to lead so that you can enter the returning phase. Do that long enough and well enough, and give yourself an opportunity to reach level 5, experience its upsides and experience its upsides. This is where I am at with my leadership level, where all I am doing is spending so much time learning. I am learning accounting here because I know, of course, I have an accountant who works for me. I'm picking up an accounting class. I have an accountant who works for me, but sometimes I just see what they would do, and I'm like, okay, maybe we could do this better. And of course, I want her to learn. We are putting her into a lot of training, but even myself, I want to be able to understand what her experience and how can we relate with what she's saying in such a way that whenever I am leading and whenever she's allowing me to lead her, I can actually be a valuable asset to her at the same time. So the idea of leading, when you can and where you are given the chance to lead, you don't stop at one level. You don't stop at one specific location. Leadership is not a destination. Leadership is a journey, and we started with that. It's a continuous journey where you keep on improving yourself. And that is done by learning, by earning, which means production, and by returning or giving back, and that is leaving a legacy.
Absolutely.
That is the most important part of leadership.
And talking here about the downside, we got 15 minutes to the top of the hour. We tried to make sure that we finish this today, since it's our last episode on this on this series on leadership. But the first thing John Maxwell talks about here, which I found very interesting, said that being on the pinnacle can make you think you've arrived. And this is actually, I mean, if there are 5 levels of leadership and I'm on level 5, what do you think I'm going to think? I've arrived, obviously. You know, there's nothing on top of that. But he mentions here, quotes here Jim Collins by saying that those who fallen have an entitlement mindset, ballasted by arrogance. He wrote that for such leaders, success is viewed as deserved rather than fortuitous, fleeting, and even hard-earned in the face of a daunting odds. People begin to believe that success will continue almost no matter what the organization decide to do or not to do. And we're not only talking about level 5 leaders here. We're talking about level 5 organizations. Have you ever seen that one team that thinks that we can never ever be beaten and stop doing the things that they were doing to keep them on top? Or have you ever found that one person that thinks that I've arrived and I no longer need to train as much as I used to, I no longer need to do the things that I used to? Every time a leader starts thinking that I deserve this success and I no longer need to put in the work because I am who I am, and regardless of what I do or regardless of what I say, I'm just going to get away with it. That's when those things start coming back and biting them the back. And we see that even in politics. We see that among organizations that think that, you know, we will never fall. And it's always sad. Sometimes mad, sometimes funny, sometimes it's a teaching moment when you see an organization that has existed for more than 100 years going bankrupt. And sometimes you wonder, what did they do wrong? And the story, I read a funny story about actually Nokia. Nokia, you remember when Nokia, I don't know about y'all, but in Africa, I remember the late 90s, early 2000s when Nokia became Nokia 3310. I mean, this was a leading company. And I think John Maxwell or someone else, or maybe Zig Ziglar, talks about it in another book that I read. I can't remember the author that talks about it actually, who says that when organization fails to stay up to date, when organization fails to go with the technology, when organization fails to follow the trend of the world, when they believe that, hey, we've always been successful, we always be successful, that's when the organization start falling. The other example is Kodak. Kodak was the leading company when it came to photography. They had films. But when everybody was going digital, there's actually a book I read when they're talking about that example. It said when everybody was going digital, they asked the CEO, they say, hey, we should start thinking about going digital. The CEO say, well, we're in the film industry. If we go digital, it's like shooting ourselves in the foot. And they never wanted to move digital until they had to move digital. And it was already too late because other companies had already come in with a competition and doing stuff like that. So every time a leader starts thinking, and it doesn't matter, to me, it doesn't matter if you're a level 1 or level 5 leader. Every time you start thinking that I deserve and it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter what I say, I can still stay here. That's literally the beginning of your downfall. As a matter of fact, I think Solomon talks about it. He said that pride comes before downfall. So every time pride starts coming to you, just know that the downfall is not too far away.
I mean, this is the type of stuff that we see on a regular basis in basketball games.
Mm-hmm.
You see one team with the greatest momentum that has a 30-point lead
Mm-hmm.
as we are turning into the third quarter. 30-point lead. And then you see, oh, wow, it's the greatest comeback in history of basketball. And just like that, a turn of events,
Yep.
the momentum switches. The players kind of just feel like, yeah, they take everything for granted at that point. They settle. That, hey, we're leading by 30. What could go wrong? And at the end, yeah, they end up losing. And John C. Maxwell says here, momentum can overcome a lot of problems. But even great momentum cannot continually compensate for negligence, arrogance, or stupidity.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Those will always take down leadership. It doesn't matter which level you are in. Once you become arrogant, once you start taking things for granted, and once you just start acting like a person who hasn't learned anything from where you came from to where you are, you will easily come from level 5 to level 1.
Yep.
So, and that's actually the danger of leading. So once you have picked up this cross, and as he said at the beginning, he said level 5 requires you to have some type of talent actually in leadership. You have to be a naturally born leader to get to level 5. But easily you can come from level 5 to find yourself again at level 1.
And it's very interesting because the lessons that he's teaching here on level 5 actually apply to every single level. Every single level. These things can come back and bite you if you're not careful. So the second one John Maxwell talks about here, he said being on the pinnacle can lead you to believe your own praise. I think this doesn't even have to do with level 5. The time you start believing your own praise, the time you start believing that what you say is the gospel, the time you start believing that I don't need people around me to be successful, or everybody that has helped you to get to where you are, you no longer need them to stay there. That's the time you begin. I mean, it's the second step to your downfall. To me, that's how I look at it. And I don't know if you have the same feeling, Adam, but I feel like all of this is kind of rooted in pride. Everything that John Maxwell is talking about the downside of a level 5 leader is kind of really rooted in pride. And one thing I wanted to mention, I think I can't remember where I heard this from, but they say that it's much easier to get to the top. What is hard is to stay on the top.
Yeah.
You look at the NBA season. You look at the Bucks. They were on the top 2 years ago, and you look at the Lakers, and sometimes not even making it to the playoffs. And these people have earned 13, 15 rings. They have 15 banners in their arena. And you think about it, getting to the top, maybe hard, but staying there is even more challenging. So every level of leadership, to me, to be honest, when you start believing your own price, especially if you're on level 1, that's just your way out of leadership. But when you start believing your own price, you start believing that, okay, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. Whatever I say is the gospel. It always comes back and bites you in the back. I don't like picking on President Trump, but I believe that's some of the stuff that got him in trouble. Because everything is said to him was the gospel. And when people started using the very same words he said against him, of course, it looks like a witch hunt or something like that. But every time you start, and there are numerous examples, Trump is just the first one that came to my mind. But every time someone start believing their own press, is the beginning of their downfall.
I mean, it's a basic principle of construction. You go think of a house. It takes a long time to actually get a house to stand and to actually be a house and so on. But with the enough power, it takes a couple hours
To take that
for
out.
the entire building to collapse. So think about that for a moment, at the point when you start thinking that, okay, whatever you say is, that's it. It's settled. I'm actually studying in my Bible studies recently. I'm studying the book of Ecclesiastes. And Solomon is really giving a lot of wisdom there. He spent like a huge portion, at least the very two first chapters, where he's talking about just vanity, how things are vain. He talked about how he was king and all of that is vain.
Yep.
How everything that comes and goes, everything is just like wind. It comes and goes and all is vain. He actually goes even further, talks about wisdom being vain. Like you can even have a lot of wisdom,
I talked about
but
knowledge.
it all just gonna mean nothing.
Yeah.
Like I was like, okay, maybe when I was reading that, I was like, okay, maybe when he gets to wisdom, because I just read wisdom. Okay, I was like, okay, so maybe wisdom, he's gonna say something about, but you read the whole verse, then at the end he say it's all like following winds.
Yep.
It's all vain.
Yeah.
And then and then he goes like, yeah, this guy tried everything. We talk about Pinnacle. This guy's a 5-level leadership,
Yep.
like super high.
Absolutely.
But at the end, he did not even fulfill a lot of the stuff that was supposed to end up fulfilling. And he gives this a lot of wisdom. And I would recommend, this is not really a faith-based directly book. This is just a
the
wisdom
book
book.
of Ecclesiastes.
So Ecclesiastes is
Yeah.
one part of the Bible that you don't want to miss reading. It's there.
Even the Proverbs. The Proverbs.
Yeah, even
and-
the
and
Proverbs.
Ecclesiastes, you don't need to be a Christian or even
No,
believe.
you
no.
do not.
That
You do
stuff
not.
is
You
really
can just
real life, real life. stuff.
absolutely, you can just get a lot of wisdom from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the third point here, say being on the Pinnacle can make you lose focus.
And that's being
And,
again on top of the organization.
Yeah. What is the most important thing? Because focus here depends on what is so important. And John C. Maxwell said one thing here that caught my attention. He said, if leaders who reach the Pinnacle want to make the most of their time there, they must remain focused on their vision and purpose and continue leading at the highest level. The only reason why, you have to remember this all the time, and I'm also reading this in Leading Like Jesus. The only reason why people follow you is because you have a vision. Like, you can be the greatest guy in the world. Think about it. But if you do not have the vision, a vision that people actually believe in, and they feel like they could follow, and you are showing them like, hey, there's this vision. If we get there, this is where it's going to look like. This is where it's going to be. This is a purpose. As soon as you lose that, as soon as it starts becoming blurry to you as a leader, your entire organization collapses and people stop following you. And that is something, and of course, Lead Like Jesus, he's talking about Jesus' vision, where Jesus is showing you that, hey, what I'm thinking about for you is like, there is a promised land. There is a place where I'm going to prepare one for you. And this is kind of the laid out plan. This is how I want you. This is the purpose of you serving. This is why you should stay in this organization. This is why you should remain following the principles that I am giving you. And it's basically the same with leading any organization. I realized that in my own organization, actually, I have not reached any level of Pinnacle, but as soon as there was blur in my vision, people started leaving. We lost momentum when I started just combining and adding stuff. And we started losing just people in every aspect. And it was very hard for me. And I realized like, okay, what happened? Why people are leaving? Then I just realized that I was stepping out of the vision. And now every project that I bring to the organization, what I do is first, I restate the vision of the organization, where we are trying to be. And then I show to my people how this specific project matches where we are trying to be. And that's why probably we don't make a lot of money, because I don't want to step out and be like, okay, from now on, we're going to start selling electronics, which tempted us at a certain point. We need capital, we need money. And then our engineers go like, well, if you try to sell buy electronic and sell them, then what's the point of us being here? You can't call yourself an engineering company, an engineering firm, if all you do is just import, export.
Absolutely.
Like you literally buy stuff in and then sell. So it doesn't work like that.
So we got 3 minutes here. We're trying to wrap this up, and I'll stay reflective of time. So the best behaviors on level 5. We go through them quickly, and if you want to know more, you can definitely pick up the book, The 5 Levels of Leadership by Dr. John Maxwell. So the first one, it says that make room for others at the top. A few points that it gives you, and I'm going to read them quickly here as Adam, we take on level 2, the second best behavior on level 5. The first one that he talks about here, the leader's desire, being succeeded instead of being needed. That should always be our ambition. We want to be succeeded. We want to train the person who's going to replace us if anything ever happens to us, or just replace us in whatever that we're doing, so we can move to higher levels. In terms of Pineapple, there's no any higher level, but think about at what point who can replace me, who can do this job better than me. And this applies to every single level. When you're on level 1, level 2, building your relationship, trying to make the team productive, trying to reproduce leaders on level 4, think always in terms of like, how can I train someone to do what I'm doing? And that's how, even from level 1 or level 2, you can start building reproducing leaders. The second thing that John Maxwell talks about here under the first point, he said leaders focus, working on people's strength instead of their weaknesses. And I think that's one mistake we make a lot in corporate. We look on the weaknesses of the people and we want to improve them. If we capitalize on the strength and spend a little more time on the weaknesses, we have employees that are more doing what they're actually good at and they're best at. And I know I'm going a little too quickly through this, but the third one he talks about here, the leader's attitude, giving away power instead of holding on to it. And that's another thing. You got to learn to let go. Let go of your power, especially on level 5. Let go of your power and learn how to build other people that can live on the same level as you. That's what it means to make room for people at the top. The fourth one John Maxwell talks about here is the leader's perspective, seeing potential leaders as they could be instead of who they are. That's the one thing I've always believed. If you treat people as they could be, they are going to respond not as they are, but as they could be. If you treat someone as a level 5, as a 5-star employee, at some point the person will start responding that way. If you treat them as trash, guess what? They also respond the way you are treating them. So always keep that in mind. I think we talked about that before, the 101 principle. Find 1% good in a person and give it 100% of your attention. And the last one John Maxwell talks about here is the leader's impact, knowing it takes a level 5 leader to develop a level 4 leader. It takes a level 5 leader to develop a level 4 leader. If you want to build other leaders, learn to stay on level 5 and start building level 4 leaders. Adam?
The second best behavior that he talks about here is continually mentor potential level 5 leaders. His 2 points that stick out here. He say you have to have a lot of good leaders to select the best leaders, and you must give your best to all potential level 5 leaders, because you may be surprised by who finishes the strongest. Everyone that you see had potential to lead at the highest level, give them a chance to lead. Give people opportunity. One of the things that I've really appreciated in my life is in my boss, my advisor, Dr. Jones. He looks at the potential of everyone in the lab. And when it comes to a specific thing that she observes, she looks and she goes, okay, Adam, go take care of that. Adam, I think you're going to be a best fit here. you're going to always, so giving you that opportunity to be in charge and to take leadership over things is crucial for level 5.
Yeah. The third one here John Maxwell talks about is create an inner circle that will keep you grounded. And to me, this doesn't have to be a level 5 thing. On every single level, even just in your current and everyday life, have people around you that can tell you the truth. Have people around you, and we talked about this before, that keep you grounded, that, you know, that remind you that, listen, you are still a human being after everything, regardless of how much success you have, regardless of how many things that you've achieved. If they start seeing like some level of pride raising in you, if they start seeing like you are diverting away from your goals, your promises, or even, you know, your vision, have people around you that can keep you closer. And I think John Maxwell talks about this in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the law of the inner circle. You can check that out.
Yeah, and the fourth point, he say, do things for the organization that only level 5 leaders can do. And that is what we've been talking about during the entire episode. Making sure that you are training other people, you are leaving a legacy, you are only doing things that matter for the highest level. It's the type of thing, I really kind of just want to push myself to be in this path because it gives you a level of purpose that's nobody else. It gets you scared of your own dreams. Like what you can achieve and the potential that you are offering. And one thing he say here is you have to keep your eyes, ears, and heart open to the possibilities. The success you have hasn't been given to you for only yourself. And that's the part of service. And it's a thing that only level 5 leaders can end up doing.
Absolutely. On the fifth point here, John Maxwell talks about planning for your succession. And I think we already talked about this. Who is going to replace you once you are no longer there? And that's the question he's asking here. Who's going to replace you in your organization, your current job, or whatever that you're doing, whatever that you're building? If you have a personal business, who is going to replace you if you're no longer there? It gives a quote here, and I'm going to read it. It says, the ultimate is actually by Lauren Wolf. It said that the ultimate test for a leader is not whether he or she makes smart decisions or take decisive action, but whether he or she teaches others to be leaders and builds an organization that can sustain itself even after he or she is not around. And this is what we talked about, building an organization around ideologies, not around yourself. Every time you build an organization around yourself, that organization is prone to go with you, to go with you. If you go today, the organization is gone with you. You know, so learn to build an organization with a vision. Let people focus on the vision and not on you. And every time they focus on the vision, if you're not there, the vision will continue without you.
And the last one he talked about is leave a positive legacy. And we've talked about legacy a lot, but there is one point here that I just want to raise up. He said, don't let yourself get to the final day of your life wondering let me read again.
Go ahead.
Don't let yourself get to the final days of your life wondering what could have been. Decide today what your life will be, and then take action each and every day to live your dreams and leave your legacy. And I cannot emphasize on this enough. Every single day, like literally, I've embraced this philosophy so much to a point where a lot of people who know me, when they ask me, how are you doing, Adam? I tell them I'm living the dream. Pretty much. It's like no cap. It's just that. The fact that you have to daily live the dream, live the vision that you are embodying, like the vision that you are standing for, and strive so hard to create a legacy, because that's the only thing that's going to be remembered about you.
Absolutely. I think this is a great way to conclude this series, asking yourself the question, what type of legacy are you going to leave? or what kind of organization are you building right now? Are you building an organization that's centered around you? Are you building a department that's centered around you, or are you building a department that can survive and be sustained without you? The only way to become a great leader, the only way to live on a level 5 leadership is to learn to live beyond yourself, to have a vision that transcends your existence, to leave a legacy behind you. Who is going to replace you when you're going to be there? Every time you think as a leader you are needed, then you are not leading at your best potential. You don't want to be needed. You want to be replaced. You want to have people, and not in a bad way. You want to be replaced in a way that people always remember the great work and the great investment that you've input in them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with this that we'll be finishing today's episode. And this is the second to our last episode for this season. Again, our last episode we air next Tuesday on both on YouTube and Facebook. On both on YouTube and all our podcast platforms. We're on Amazon Music. We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Podcasts. We're on Stitcher, and we are as well on Spotify. So if you're following us on any of those platforms, do not forget to hit the follow button. Or if you're on YouTube, do not forget to hit the subscribe button. And also send us your feedback. Tell us what you would like us to improve for our third season, which we start in the month of May. And we are having again more guests that are coming. We are reviewing some of their books, and we have a lot of books that we are planning for the next season. It will be 19 episodes for this season. And thanks for all the people who've been listening and following closely. Big shout out to our friend listening from all the way in Eastern Congo, Kisangani, Swedi Maneno. Thank you so much for listening in. He sent us a lot of good feedback regarding our very last episode on how to reproduce leaders. So we really love when we hear that feedback and what you're learning, what you don't like, what you would like us to learn or to improve on how we're doing things. And we sent again a survey like we did for our first season. We sent a survey for this second season to see what's going on in your life. What would you like us to talk about? What books would you like us to discuss? And what we can do to actually help you to grow in your personal journey. We're still working on our website. Of course, if you still go to www.theunboundedgrowth.com, it will redirect you to our Spotify and our podcast. Podcast can form a platform where you can listen to. But also do not forget that we have our leadership conference coming up in November of this year. We are actually so excited about that we keep on talking about it. But there's a lot of stuff that are coming that we're going to communicate when we come back in the month of May. But do not forget to tune in next Tuesday for our interview with Montage Woods. Adam?
Yeah, that's all I have. Really, it's been amazing this season, and we're gonna be coming strong for the next season, which also gonna be the season that celebrates our first year anniversary of Unbounded Growth. So it's been amazing, and now we are in about 37 countries worldwide that people listen to us, all the way from Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, you name it, everywhere in Europe now, and many countries in Africa, Australia, all the way Latin America, different countries in Latin America. So it's really been amazing. And the people who have been listening and tuning in and really reaching out, people have been offering us even some options for sponsorship and working with us. It's really been amazing. So thank you so much. And we hope to see you in the next season. And stay growing, keep growing and keep developing yourself, and start leading, and start that today.
Absolutely. We'll see you next Tuesday for our final episode, and then we'll be off for the month of April. We come back in the month of May, the second week of the month of May. We come back for new episode. God bless you, and you have a wonderful one. Bye-bye.